Hey everyone, and welcome to the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. No Rube today; he'll be back soon. So we have a fun guest today, Mike Mulhern. Welcome, man.
Fun guest. Okay,
It is fun. So this is actually a lot of fun for me because Rube and I on the pod over the last couple of years have mentioned you a lot because Mike is our pre and post game producer as well as Birds Huddle during the week. So. Like, your name comes up quite a bit. So I think people probably will recognize your name, so it's fun to, like, get you on here a little bit.
Yeah, I'm like the Booney of the best show ever.
Yeah, kind of.
Behind the scenes guy a little bit. Yeah.
And it's funny, too, because, like, so many times we've basically done podcasts, like, 15 feet from here, like, where we sit in the newsroom. So it's good to get it on tape.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we pretty much do this every day. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Honestly, I always said, like, that would be a better show. We couldn't air it,
yeah.
But, like, whatever we talk about out there is
the newsroom
sometimes more fun than what actually gets to air. But it is a big week. We have a lot to talk about. Seattle game coming up on Monday Night Football, so there's an extra day. The Eagles are playing around with that a little bit. We'll get into some of what they're doing with that. We talked to Nick Sirianni. I thought it was a very interesting press conference, and that's a word I don't like using a lot because it's very generic, but there was a lot in there, so we'll break down some of that. I want to start off, Mike. The news of the day was something we didn't really expect. We got a text on our phones this morning. The Eagles were supposed to have a walkthrough on Thursday. They ended up putting the pads on for a full practice.
Yeah, the walkthrough has kind of been the norm over the last couple of years here under Sirianni, especially late in the year. He doesn't want guys to get beat up. And it's interesting, on the heels of him, I guess that was Tuesday, talking about how he needs to do a better job. I thought our guys were tired.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're kind of going the opposite direction here.
Exactly.
So just kind of an interesting dichotomy there.
And I think he was, maybe when he was talking about the players, like, taking care of I think it was after the overtime game, but it still holds true. Like, they played 82 snaps.
Yeah.
On defense, at least, in that last game. And this is like, they have done it before. I remember it was Super Bowl year, I think.
It was Malcolm, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And Malcolm Jenkins kind of went to Doug and was like, we have to do this. We have to reset. So, yeah, I wonder who that guy was this week. Someone in that leadership council maybe went to Nick and said, we need to put the pads on, or do you think that was just a Nick decision himself?
I don't know. That's a good question. To me, it kind of seems like a little bit of a message, like, hey, guys, this isn't good enough. And it wasn't just like they played bad. A lot of misassignments. And Nick actually brought up that they put the pads on to work on fundamentals, which, yeah, if you watch that game, you can see why.
Yeah.
Like, turning the football over. Like, if in a walkthrough, you're not going through the ball security cycle. So I think it makes sense. And my sense from the locker room was that the players were okay with it, which is always like a question when you make a change like this.
Yeah, I would think, too, like, you have those 4 veteran guys, those big voices like Lane, Kelsey, Fletch, and BG. They've been through it all. I'm sure they are like, yeah, I don't want, like, this could be it for me. I don't want this season to fall off the rails. Like, what's one extra padded practice? Like, let's get this right now. And, you were there as Fletch talked in the locker room on Sunday about, seeing who the dudes are. Like, I thought that was a message. This seems like a message, and we'll see how well everybody else hears it, I guess, come Monday night.
Yeah, I was talking to Brandon Graham about the extra practice, and he was like, "Look, I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, if the confetti's falling on us in February, like we'll kind of get ready for another practice. That's not. It's a minimal output or a minimal concession to give up a walkthrough day to." If it helps them win this game, which is all of a sudden, this is an enormous game.
Yeah. I mean, you look down, and I feel like there are 2 camps right now. It's like the season's over, they're falling apart, everything's, going to hell. Or it's like, oh, they're going to win the last 4 and they'll be fine. Like, there's a middle ground there where you go 3-1 and you still end up as the 5 seed. So, yeah, it's extremely important to get it going right now with Seattle. Going to be a tough test, loud place to play, and I know we'll get into that a little later on, some of the matchups there as well.
Yeah, it's funny, though, because it does feel like the entire season rests on this one game in a weird way.
Yeah.
And it's we looked at that 6-game stretch when they started, and we thought, yeah, I mean, if they go 3-3, it's not ideal, but
especially when you went into it where they were.
Problem is, man, those other teams have not helped them.
I know nobody loses. That's a big issue.
Yeah.
The Niners lost those 3 in a row in the middle of the year, and you thought like, all right, they're a little vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get Trent Williams and Debo back, and it's like, all right, can they ever lose? Like they look pretty unstoppable.
They do.
And then obviously Dallas, that Thursday night game a couple weeks ago against these same Seahawks, you're hoping maybe Geno pulls it out in the end, but they come up a little short, and they're right there with you. And that 5 seed is a big difference.
Yeah, that's a big difference. And like
the 1 and the 2, I think like you can't make a case that the 1 isn't, or the 2. Like, I think they're somewhat comparable though. If you did kind of play it out, because if you're the 2, the Lions end up as the 3. You're playing the worst wild card team. It could be a Minnesota, an NFC South team at the link that feels like a win. And then the next round, if everything held and, Detroit and Dallas won, you'd get Jared Goff coming here in round 2.
Yeah, you feel pretty good about that.
And then you would get whatever's left of Niners-Cowboys in the title game. Obviously, if it's the Niners, you got to go there. That's a tough trade-off. But it's not a horrible scenario if you end up as the 2. But the 5 is
then it's a tough road, man.
You're on the road in round 2. You're on the road in the title game pretty much assuredly. You're on the road in round 1. You don't want to face that.
You don't want to be the 5. Yeah, definitely not. I mean, obviously, like I get what you're saying. The 1 is still the best.
Yeah, it's certainly the best. But
you get one less game to play.
But I feel like people view it like, oh, if we're not the 1, it's like, what are we even doing here? But like, if you're the 2, you got a great shot.
I agree with that.
The 2 is a very nice spot to be in.
Yeah. And look, I think they have a real good shot at still being at least the 2.
Yeah.
And the 1 is not out of the question because the 49ers have a much tougher schedule. That game in Baltimore, like that might be
that's a Christmas. That's after Eagles-Giants on Christmas. That's the nightcap there.
Man, this city could have a great Christmas
or the worst ever,
or it's canceled forever. Yeah.
Yeah, it could very much go one of 2 ways.
Aside from the Eagles changing their practice schedule today, I thought the Sirianni press conference had some interesting moments, some moments that I think are notable. The press conference started with him getting asked about motion, which, look, he's given his thoughts on it before, but it's as long as they're dead last in the NFL, it's still a valid question.
Yeah.
And they ran more of it in this last game. I don't know if it worked.
Yeah.
But they ran some more of it, so I think there's some validity to it. But his thoughts on criticism, to me, I didn't expect him to say this, that they listen to the criticism, and sometimes it does spur some change, and they use it a little bit.
Yeah, so if you're a fan and you have a sign and you want to camp outside the NovaCare complex, he'll see it, he'll hear it, and you get some coffee out of it, too.
Coffee. I don't know if the Fire Desai guy got the coffee.
Yeah,
it has to be like constructive criticism to get coffee, I think.
Yeah.
There's a certain level you have to reach with your signage.
You can't call for jobs, I think. I think that's a non-starter for Nick. But yeah, it is interesting that he definitely hears it. And then the question becomes, and a question he's been asked is, how much do you go away from what's gotten you here and what has worked? And if you look at that game specifically against the Cowboys, a lot of the criticism is about, everything's long developing, everything's down the field. But they had like 4 or 5 plays down the field. If they hit 2 or 3 of them, that game could have been completely different.
Yeah.
And then you factor in the turnovers as well. I don't think many people came away from that game thinking like, oh, they should have won or if this play or that play. But like, I don't think it was like the Niners game. They had no chance. The Dallas game, I feel like they could have been in many different ways. And I kind of equate it like the way they run their offense and the way Jalen kind of operates. There's been some criticism of him not taking the checkdowns. It's almost like the NBA team that just like relies on 3-pointers. And it's like, we are just going to put up as many of these as possible because they're worth more. If you take deep shots, they are worth it. You get down the field quicker. And a run play is almost like the equivalent of like a long 2. So I think that's kind of like, if we're working in this many deep shots, like a run on 2nd and 10 to get us 3 yards, like, it's almost not worth it in a sense. Obviously, you want to keep the defense honest. I do think they should lean more into the run game and, get Jalen involved in that as well. I think they've been maybe a little overprotective, and maybe we'll see what happens come January. But yeah, that's a tough question to figure out how you operate and how you take that criticism and what you do afterwards.
Yeah, you're right, because it has been a successful offense, like by every metric since Nick has been here, and especially since the beginning of last year when they finally got some receivers in the building. Like it looks different. Like it's a good offense. So you don't want to change everything. Like what you're doing works, and what you said about the deep shots, that's a Nick Sirianni
Staple kind of.
staple. Yeah, he loves those explosives. That's one of the stats he actually really does care about. And for him, it's 16 plus yards passing, 10 plus yards rushing. I don't know exactly where those numbers came from, but that's how he views explosive plays. And you're right, he wants to hit those. But on the flip side of that, sometimes when your defense is dragging, you can extend a drive and make sure you're on the field a little bit. You can be complimentary in that way.
Yeah, and as the CEO of the team, the way he operates on game day, I do think he could be a little more cognitive of how the game is playing out. Like in that Cowboys game, your defense is getting run off the field first few drives of the game, and then it took until maybe that last drive before the half where it seemed like they got a little more committed to the run. But then they only end up coming away with 3, and it just felt like the game completely flipped there. Dallas comes down, gets a touchdown out of that, and then it was just, kind of over from there.
Yeah, I agree. And on the last pod, me and Barrett were talking about ways to fix the offense. And I think there has to be some middle ground between what they've done the last couple of weeks, because I think there are ways to help this offense. But then again, it's worked for the most part. And a lot of the criticism, too, has been you're relying too much, and he was asked about this as well, you're relying too much on your outside receivers to win one-on-ones. You're not scheming them open. But you have really good receivers who win a lot of one-on-ones. I think, again, there's some middle ground there where, of course, you want to take your shots with one-on-ones, but are there moments where you can – we've talked about motion before, can you use an orbit motion and get some steam with Devontae?
Look at Devontae at Alabama, that Heisman year. They had him all over the place. That certainly seems like something they could do. I do find it kind of amusing a little bit that this week there's questions about how many targets those guys are getting. And, 2-3 weeks ago, people are up in arms that they threw 2 screens to Julio Jones. Now it's why are you only throwing the ball to these guys?
Yeah, I think it's so rare.
But to your point, there is a middle ground. Let's get the ball to DeAndre Swift in a little bit of space on a check down. That seems very
He's
doable.
the one guy I think you can argue that deserves to get targets planned for him.
I agree.
In the game plan. Well, I don't think you should be force-feeding the ball to Quez Watkins when you have A.J. Brown. That doesn't make sense. But DeAndre Swift is someone who legitimately should be a bigger part of the game plan as a receiver.
And we saw in that Monday night game against the Chiefs, they were having a hard time running the ball. They, give him the jet sweep. They run a couple middle screens to him. Haven't seen either of those since, really.
Yeah.
Are they just
it's funny
holding that for the playoffs?
We're always going to talk about that jet sweep. That should be a staple of this offense. And it's they ran it once. And
they ran it once,
great.
And then they ran the counter of it where they just handed the ball off to Boston Scott as Swift came in motion the next week, and that's it.
Yeah, and they've been pretty good in that pony personnel package, and it's weird they haven't leaned into that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I thought maybe that was a byproduct of Goddard's absence, and now they're kind of all right, we don't need to do it anymore. If Goddard's out there, we want the 3 receivers because we want the the verticality that Quez brings, which defenses may or may not respect. We'll see.
What do you legitimately think? I understand the premise behind that, but if he never gets the ball thrown to him, how much are defenses really respecting it?
I don't think they are at all. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that I feel like this year the big change, and this has been kind of said a couple different places, that teams are kind of playing them in a lot more too-high safety, which last year teams were so scared of how well they ran the ball in 2021 that they played, 7 guys in the box a lot and were worried about the Eagles just running it down their throats, and that opened up all the deep shots on the outside. This year, they're still operating like they can just take those deep shots, even though there are 2 high safeties all the time. And it's kind of crazy how much success they've still had, considering they haven't been able to run teams out of that 2 high look. I wonder if at some point, again, is this a January thing? Do they, if they run into Dallas and Dallas is playing 2 high safeties, do they try to commit more to the run in that game to force them to bring an extra guy down and then take those shots?
Yeah, that was you'll be shocked by this. That was Barrett's point on Tuesday, is that you got to run them out of it.
Yeah, I'm not the the old man yelling at the cloud, run the ball.
But there's validity to it.
Yeah.
Because you can change up the way the defense plays you a little bit. And right now, you hit on that earlier with Jalen, he's not really the +1 anymore.
Yeah.
And it again, there's a balance here because you don't want him to get hurt. We've seen that. And it's funny because, like, he always pushes back to just can get hurt running, but, like, that's
What he
literally what
hurts.
happened last year
Yeah.
in Chicago. He got hurt running the football. It seems like at times they're calling plays with the thought process that, like, he's still that guy and they're still running him like that, but he's not. Like, how many times have we seen him slide for a no gain this year?
You're almost worse off doing it that way because they're like treating him as if he is in the number count for the defense and they have to account for him, and the defense isn't accounting for him.
Yeah.
So you're just like, your plays are kind of dead on arrival. Whereas if they just ran a more traditional, not, scrapping the offense and starting over, but if they weren't doing as many, like, inside zones, if, maybe the defense, you just get Swift upfield quicker, Don't read that edge guy because he's not respecting Jalen pulling the ball anymore.
Sure.
You're almost worse off continuing to do that when Jalen is not the threat.
Exactly. And sometimes they're doing it on early downs, and then it puts them behind the sticks a little bit. And I want to get back to Swift real quick because this Cowboys game, to me, was like a prime time where you could have gotten him involved in the passing, and that's an aggressive defense.
Yeah.
I know, like, their linebacker play is pretty good. Marquise Bell's a fun player to watch side to side, but still, like, I don't know. Screens should be there, right?
Yeah, and they used to run a ton of those, Goddard screens as well. That was like a big play. Once they got over midfield, that used to be kind of one of their go-tos.
It was like almost
every
on,
time,
yeah,
like clockwork. They'd get him the ball and let him run it into the red zone. But yeah, Swift in space feels like an easy answer that they should be able to dial up a little more. But the running back splits, maybe it just seems like they'd rather, in a lot of situations, have Gainwell in as the pass protector, which kind of negates the idea of, not having Swift out there.
But Gainwell can catch the ball too a little bit. Maybe not. He's not as explosive as Swift, but I have no problem if Gainwell's out there on a third down, like, make it look like he's going to chip and leak him out.
Yeah. Yeah, and overall, I will say, like, I'm not in the sky is falling camp. I do think their offense is effective. I wouldn't, scrap it and start over, certainly. I think it's a little bit of everything. It's the turnovers. It's a little bit of the decision-making. And obviously, certainly some of the play calling as well. I think, everyone wants to blame one thing. I think it's kind of a mesh of all of that. And I do think it's fixable. It's just interesting because, no matter what they do over the next 4 weeks, assuming they play well offensively, no one's going to, like, I don't think it's going to, like, quell anyone's concerns entirely of what happens
That's
come
funny
Dallas
you say
or San
that,
Francisco.
because
I don't know that there's a level they can play at where people will be like, all right, we're good.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's tough to see in the future like that. On our post-game pod, Reuben and I were talking about that, and he was in a different mindset there. Maybe like we're too close to these two losses. Because in my mind, like, you're right. I agree with you. Like, I don't think there's anything they can do that in the back of people's minds they're not going, yeah, but the two teams you got to beat to get back to the dance blew you out.
Yeah.
Blew the doors off. Rube was in a different thought. He said, like, look, if they win out and they look convincingly good in these games, which isn't a given, people will feel better. And it's tough. I don't know where people's minds will be. People might be back on board. 4 wins is a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. And if it's like Jalen throwing 3 touchdown passes a game and, Swift's breaking off long runs and they're kind of recommitted there, I do think it could change the narrative a little. But when you get to that game in December or in January, you're still going to, have those questions in the back of your mind, certainly.
My favorite thing, too, is that Nick Sirianni still won't admit that he's looking for the criticism. It comes from the PR staff. Someone sent him this. I don't understand.
Talking about the same guy who
funny.
was, like, yelling at reporters after the Chiefs game as he came off the field.
I don't understand. Like, so many coaches and players do this where they're like, they won't admit that they just read it or they watch it. We know you do. I would watch it all the time. If someone's talking about me and my offense,
You're reading the comments.
They're saying I don't know what I'm doing. Like, yeah. Sometimes I'll read bad comments on the show here.
That's good content.
Yeah. We had one that was, it was one of my favorite ones ever. It said, this podcast is like 15 minutes of football talk and 40 minutes of fluff. And I was like, that's not entirely inaccurate. I think that was like the day Rube was talking about like Lancaster or something for
Sure.
a long time.
I mean, like Jersey track
Yeah.
and field, or some obscure
I
bands.
was actually chatting with him last night, and I told him you were going to be on the show for him. And he said, let's hope he doesn't start talking about South Jersey track. And I was like, what if it's that chair? What if it's...
It might be, yeah.
And then he brought up that it's long before that chair.
Yeah.
He's been talking about track and field. I don't have a segue here. I want to just flip sides of the
Sure.
ball. And I had a chance to talk to Sidney Brown and Keely Ringo in the locker room today, and it really struck me in this last game. I know things didn't go well for them defensively. Especially Keely. But like he did settle down a little bit after that. Gosh, it was a rough play. He gives up a catch, gets called for two
NFL
penalties.
snap on defense.
Yeah, but I thought he actually like settled in a little bit, and I understand what Sean Desai's trying to do because that secondary is old and slow.
Yeah.
So getting some athletes out there makes some sense to me. Now, I wish I would have done it in week 4.
Yeah, this is a conversation we've had all year. Is like from the jump, were you better off instead of playing Justin Evans as a starting safety, throwing Sidney Brown to the Wolves? Maybe he wasn't ready, but maybe he learns better on the fly.
And he had that injury.
Yeah, he got hurt in that
too.
Tampa game. That was at week 3, and they had started to use him in the nickel a little bit there.
Yeah.
And then he gets hurt. Kind of set them back a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, Keely's got great speed. I wonder how much of that was just the speed of the Dallas receivers. Because you have Cooks, you have Gallup, you have Turpin. Like, those guys are burners. And I wonder how much of that was just like completely matchup dependent versus how much they want to get those guys out there going forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although, like, Seattle, we'll talk about the Seahawks in a little bit, but like, yeah, that's a little scary. I wonder how much of it is about the young players and how much of it is just like they've watched 13 weeks of James Bradbury and they're like, man, I don't know if he can run.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like we've talked a lot about the lack of like managing snaps, the defense getting tired. If they maybe purposely went into that gauntlet stretch, we're gonna run these guys out there a lot because these are important games. We know what the back half of the schedule looks like, and then we can, limit their snaps, have them fresher for the playoffs. Give Bradbury a couple series off. I don't know how much that recharges the legs, if at all. Yeah. I don't know if a Thursday full padded practice is going to help in that regard either. But just a thought that maybe they are cognizant of and trying to limit their snaps going down the stretch a little more with some of the young guys, and that includes like Nolan Smith as well.
He played 21
had a season high in snaps. That's been the one position that everybody's really talked about, trying to give guys a break a little more.
Yeah, Sean Desai's been rotating at traditionally non-rotational positions and like not rotating on the line, which is like where this team for years has rotated a bunch. It's been kind of weird. I don't know if it's too late to get these young guys involved. That's my one question. It's like you're in crunch time now. You're kind of in gotta have it mode, and all of a sudden, here's Keely Ringo game. I don't know. Like I understand why they're doing it. I question whether or not it's too late.
Yeah. Now, like I was just saying though, you kind of have the runway here to see what you have a little bit. I mean, these games are still extremely important. Yeah. Obviously, like you slip up once again, you end up as the 5 seed.
This is the team that lost to the Jets.
But would you rather see, Keely Ringo out there against Patrick Mahomes for his first action?
It's fair.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know at what point that decision could have been made where they would have been better off with a guy.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe the timing lined up like that.
Now, the one thing is they were down Bradbury early in the season. I feel like Slay was banged up a little, and that was what we saw a lot of Josh Joe, but it was kind of like, how was your 4th-round pick? He was an early 4th-round pick.
And then even Eli Ricks got some run.
And which Ricks in the slot, I think, is kind of a better fit than Keely. He seems not to have, kind of the wiggle that you might need to play there. But yeah, it was a little bit of an indictment of him early in the season that he was not ahead of Josh Jobe on the depth chart.
Even Mekhi Gardner got some snaps at safety.
Yeah.
That was like, why can't Keely do that?
Yeah.
Like similar body types. But
maybe they just like, it's a hard balance because do you obviously you're trying to win this year, but Howie's job is to, see the future a little bit more. If you put him out there and his confidence gets, shattered that quickly, and then all of a sudden you wasted a pick. Whereas now maybe he's built it up. They've coached him up. They feel confident that he can go out there and make a couple plays. Now, what happened Sunday night certainly doesn't help that play. But he did give up a deep ball as well. But he was pretty much in phase, and it was just like perfectly placed. There's not much you can do about that.
Dak was so good at
he
he was hitting his spots, man.
And then he got hurdled by Ferguson. But it's
welcome to the league, young fella. Sometimes you get hurdled.
Exactly. But would he been better off, having a tight end jump over him in week 3 and then to do that this time? Yeah, and it's not as if he wasn't learning as the season progressed. Like he.
Yeah, and by all accounts, like what he's done in practice has turned some heads.
Yeah.
And we don't get to see that.
Mm-hmm.
But like if he's not playing well in practice, they don't do this.
For sure.
There's no way they do this. So I don't know. It'll be fun to watch over the next few weeks because the secondary is old and slow, and if these guys bring some juice to it, maybe it'll help.
Yeah, and Sydney certainly put some good stuff on tape, I thought, on Sunday night.
I agree.
Do you think how do you think they include him more? Obviously, if Blankenship's back, he's not going to have a spot necessarily available to him. Do they
Although they've
use
run
Byard in the slot?
Well, they've kind of walked Byard up to play on tight ends, which I don't know if that's
that's
what you want either, but they've kind of carved out that role for Sydney, where especially on passing downs, like we'll get an extra DB out there, and I think some of their snaps went up obviously when Blankenship went down, but we also saw Bradbury playing kind of almost like a hybrid box linebacker-ish role, which probably isn't a great sign for where he's at.
Yeah.
But that was what they were doing, and they were playing Ringo outside.
Yeah. And I wonder how much that is just you can't have Bradbury on Brandon Cooks because it's just not going to end well in general. But, I mean, there aren't a lot of guys in the league that probably can't run by him at this point at receiver.
Yeah, and it's funny, too, because last year I was hearing, whispers from teams coming in, saying Bradbury can't run, but then he was using his length, and he's obviously super savvy, and he was making up for it. This year he hasn't been able to make up for it as much.
Yeah.
Do you think Slay's annoyed that he gets lumped in with Bradbury? Because Slay's
I feel like he's having a fine season.
been okay. He's not like an all-pro, but he's the least of their problems in the secondary.
Yeah, he's played well. I mean, I feel it definitely gets lumped in with Bradbury. It's like, why do we have these two old corners?
There were 2 trash cans out.
I think he made it his profile
photo.
picture. I like that he could have fun with that. He hasn't played badly at all. I mean, when targeted this year, the passer rating against him is almost identical to what it was last year. We had talked a little. Do you think I feel like they give up a lot more underneath stuff this year. Mm-hmm. How much of that is him maybe
just playing
off? Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough because no one's going to tell you if it was his decision
exactly.
or if the coaching point is to play off. But you're right. Who was that Ayuk? Yeah, he gives up that huge cushion, and then that was a second and long, right?
Yeah.
So that was
their third drive of the game.
Mm-hmm, they're backed up. There was a penalty or a negative play. They're backed up second and long, and he gives up an 11-yard completion to make it third and manageable. They convert. They move down the field, and
yeah, that was that specific drive. That was that Niners' third drive. I also remember, because that was at the height of the defensive guys are playing too many snaps. They were coming off the Bills game. First 2 drives, they go 3 and out. And then the third drive, they have the second-tier D-line out there. And I was like, man, I don't think I would do that there. I know you want to keep guys fresh, but, you have a chance to, they're buried deep in their own territory. Just send the Wolves back out there one more time. And then if they give up a couple conversions, you can yank them,
And that's kind of what we talked about, complimentary football and Nick being the CEO. If you see your offense just sputtered and you only got 6 points, you probably still have to be in attack mode on defense a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll see kind of what happens here in Seattle. I think it's going to be a game where they're, trying to build an early lead. They've talked a lot about the slow starts. That's how this team has been built, is get up early, let the defense, kind of pin their ears back, get after the quarterback, and they just haven't been able to play that way this year. They've been in so many close games. especially lately, games where they've been playing from behind. So I think that has a lot to do with why the defense hasn't been performing at the level that everybody had hoped.
Yeah, that's for sure. You're right, though, because in the last couple of weeks, I think they've been close to getting an early lead. Like the 6 points in San Francisco, like how much different is that game if it's 10 or 14-0? And then last week, it looked like they were about to keep pace with the Cowboys, and Jalen just fumbles the ball. And that drive, they were making mistakes, and they were still moving the football.
Yeah, and that's another CEO type question of Sirianni that I kind of had. Like, they're generally very aggressive. The first Niners drive, I was okay with coming away with 3, but it was like a 4th and 4, I want to say, and I'm like, I don't know. You don't know. It's the first drive of the game, so I kind of get it. But then in Dallas, they ended up with a 4th and 5, I think, on their second field goal drive. They took the 3. I'm kind of like, are you watching the game that's unfolding as much as I am to be like, all right, we can't just take 3s here? And, the way they play offense and the way they could put up points, I think, I feel like Sirianni assumes they're always going to move the ball sometimes.
Yeah.
And doesn't capitalize enough on some of the opportunities they've been getting.
That's interesting. It's like overconfidence sometimes looks like a lack of confidence.
Yeah. Like I feel like if it was 4th and 5 and they were like this week or next week, against the Giants, if he gets like a 4th and 4 in the red zone, he's probably going to go for it, because I think it's like that's the Giants, like they're not going to beat me. But I almost think you should be doing the inverse, like just put the points up against the bad team, against the good team, try to capitalize more on the opportunity.
Yeah, you're right. Especially good defenses. Like, you don't know if you're getting down there.
Yeah.
I mean, they barely got in the red zone.
Yeah, like that Kansas City game, they had 3 drives the whole game, but they were all touchdowns, and that's why they won. They put up 21, and that was all they needed.
It's funny because Nick is, I think people think he's an aggressive coach, and he's not.
Yeah, I think he's the son of a coach, which I feel like makes you kind of old school, like
maybe
by nature a little bit.
I think his tendency is to be a little less aggressive.
I agree.
And we've seen that. Like, this has played out now over 3 years. And I don't think it's always necessarily the wrong move, but, there's been some big moments where I don't think he's been aggressive enough. And we know that this is an organization that does care about the analytics. They want to be aggressive. Yeah, I think at times he kind of turtles a little bit.
Yeah. The in that Niners game, they have the 4th down. I think they're down 14, and they're in their own end, and he punts.
The 4th and 3.
Yes.
He wants everyone to know it was not a 4th and 2. It was a 4th and 3, which changes everything.
So then the next time they get the ball, they end up having to go, and because the Niners went down and scored another touchdown.
Of course they did.
Now you're down 21, and you have to go, and it's like 4th and 8. It's like, I feel like you can foresee what's going to happen a little bit, and like you have to, he did the same thing in the Dallas game. He punted. Now it actually worked out because they got the strip sack, returned for a touchdown.
He drew it up.
So
like
I think that's kind of like his mindset is like I think he always thinks they're going to get the stop or get the score, depending on who's getting the ball. And he's not like he's just an optimistic guy a little bit, I think. So he's like, all right, if we punt, we're going to get the ball back.
Or with this defense.
Yeah, not the way this has been going. Yeah, I don't think he's. I think. The dam kind of broke over the last 3 games.
Maybe someone should go out there with a sign with their 3rd down defense numbers just to remind them on the drive in that these guys are not getting off the field.
Yeah, and how much, they've been better on 1st and 2nd down. I think that, what are they, 2nd in sacks and 1st and 2nd down, and then dead last and 3rd down.
Home. It's
why
very
can't
strange.
They get there?
It's very strange. And it's not even like they're bad in 3rd and medium.
Yeah. They're bad in 3rd and long, too, which is what you're trying. Like, that's what you play for.
Yeah, it's very strange. The only time they're not bad is when it's like 3rd and a mile.
Yeah.
And, like, you're not going to get there. So the defense is a little troubling. And we'll get into some of that on the other side because I want to get into some matchups with the Seahawks.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's Famous Meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. Dave Zangaro, Mike Mulhern filling in for Reuben Frank. Big game, Mike. We talked about it. This is like all of a sudden the season kind of feels like it hinges on a game in Seattle, which is a tough place to play. But I think the Eagles are the better team here.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting. Like, Seattle's lost 4 in a row, and we talk about the Eagles gauntlet, but look what they've done.
Yeah.
Like, they had the Rams, which, Rams are frisky.
And in-division game for them.
It's an in-division game. That team's playing much better. They almost just beat the Ravens. Then they went Niners, Cowboys, Niners, now Eagles. Like, I don't know that there's a gauntlet that matches that overall. And it's the first time they've ever lost 4 in a row with Pete Carroll at the helm. So they're in a pretty desperate spot here.
A little bit of angst up there in that locker room.
Yeah. Pete's calling players out on his radio show. Some of the defensive backs, Jamal Adams and Reek Woolen, they've been kind of getting torched a little bit. That's really his specialty, is those DBs. Yeah. So, seems like things could kind of crater up there a little bit if they suffer another one. So that team could be there for the taking a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. It could be a game where the Eagles' offense finally looks the way you expect it to look. But let's talk about the other side first, because I think you look at the Seahawks team, and the scary matchup is those receivers against a secondary that's been awful, right? Yeah. And it's 3 good receivers. It's DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, who's been doing it a long time, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba, the rookie. Those are 3 really good players.
Yeah, and Metcalf has really turned it on of late. Yeah. We saw that Thursday night game against Dallas. He puts up 3 touchdowns. He's literally tracked as the fastest ball carrier this year, like faster than Tyreek Hill. Like, we're just talking about how Bradbury's lacking the speed, so can't make that matchup happen. And then you also harken back to the 2020 season when they brought Slay in, kind of to be the guy to match up with other teams' number ones. Jim Schwartz, talking to DK pregame, says you're not quite Megatron yet. He takes that personally, goes out and just obliterates Slay. So I'm sure Slay hasn't forgotten that game. And then, the rookie Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State kind of lives in the slot and has been a real chain mover for them. Obviously, the Eagles have issues at that spot. They've been rotating guys, whether it's Ricks or Roby. And then Lockett's just kind of like the do-it-all, the veteran who's going to, run the great routes. He can get downfield as well.
Probably not the deep threat he wants.
Yeah, certainly not. Yeah. But still just a savvy route runner. I think it's a real tough matchup with all 3 of those guys.
You mentioned that Metcalf game. Probably Slay's worst game as an Eagle was against DK. The PFF numbers on that, Metcalf against Slay in that game, 11 targets, 8 catches for 158 yards.
Wow. And I feel like right off the bat, I think he went right at him. And I can't remember if Metcalf got a 15-yarder or Slay did. They got in a little scuffle right off the bat.
Yeah,
and he was just
tone.
Yeah, he was just like, I'm coming after you tonight.
Think AJ Brown can maybe calm him down before the game, like my old buddy.
I hope so.
Yeah.
God, how good was that Ole Miss receiver room, and why weren't they a better team?
They should have been a better team. That's one of my favorite photos of all time.
Yeah, the two of them.
He makes AJ Brown look small. He's so big.
Hard to do. Yeah.
And AJ, at that point, was the better player.
That's up there with the Jordan Davis standing next to Devontae Wyatt, who's also a massive human. Like, oh my God, that guy.
My favorite photo of all time, and I think
you and Myles Garrett.
That's a good one. I make Myles look pretty small.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a photo of Yao Ming and J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
Which is J.J. Watt is an enormous person, and he looks like a child next to Yao. But that's kind of what that photo of DK and A.J. Brown reminded me of.
Yeah. He's a specimen. And
DK also, he has a little bit of the Jordan thing to him where he'll, use stuff for motivation. He mentioned that the Jim Schwartz interaction, but there was also, he talked about the Eagles not drafting him.
Yeah.
He was never on their board. They had him off for medical reasons.
Yeah.
But, he'll use whatever.
Now, the big question, though, is obviously they have the 3 receivers who will all be out there, but who's going to be throwing them the ball? It seems like Geno will be healthy. If he was, he was close to playing last week. He's got an extra day to heal up. So you would think it'll be him out there. has played well, certainly for them over the last 2 years. Doesn't necessarily like strike fear in you, but you know,
He makes some plays though.
yeah.
And I thought Drew Lock actually played all right.
Yeah, he did, especially against that Niners defense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, when you have those three guys and you can get them the ball, their big issue has kind of been protection. The O-line, I feel like, for years was always an issue there, but they drafted Charles Crosshigh to play left tackle.
He's been fine.
Yeah, and they got Abraham Lucas back, so they don't have to, you know, put out 41-year-old Jason Peters at right tackle anymore.
Although he gets his plays, he'll be out there a little bit.
Rotate him in a little bit.
We were joking in the locker room today. Do you think Jason Peters just tells them, like, this is my series?
Yeah, how does that work?
I don't know.
You remember the 2017 guard rotation, the left guard rotation? Yeah, he saw that firsthand and was like, "All right, I can
do this.
yeah, let me out there."
It's funny. He was actually playing all right before he got hurt, and
Yeah,
there was one primetime game where it was like the full Jason Peters experience with Seattle. He had a false start, and then he got hurt. he
Tapped
called
out,
himself
yeah.
off. Yeah.
it's funny. I was looking last night. So he's only been a part of 2 playoff wins in his career where he was on the field. Jason Peters, which
He
is kind of crazy.
tell him he didn't win that Super Bowl though.
Yeah,
There was one man walked that trophy out, and it was Jason Peters.
but yeah, it was the double doink game the next year he played in, and then last year he started for Dallas against
wow.
Tampa, and then that was the last playoff start he's had. So that's kind of crazy for a guy who's been in the league that long to only be on the field for 2 playoff wins.
It is crazy.
We'll see how much we see him on Monday night.
I think a little bit, probably not much.
Yeah.
I think he played 9 snaps last week. Abraham Lucas is back. You mentioned him. He had a knee injury, so he
missed almost the whole season.
he got hurt in week 1, and he didn't return until a couple weeks ago. You talk about the gauntlet for the team. Think about his gauntlet. He comes back in time to see Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons, and here's Hassan Reddick.
for fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yikes. Yeah. So, do you think that D line will be able to because that's the one thing we talk about. Like they're working in concert. You know,
Yeah.
the money spent on the D line. Can they get enough pressure so that the back end can hold up? And I think my bigger issue and bigger question is, you know, we kind of took for granted how good they were at stopping the run because they were great. Teams weren't even trying it.
Yeah.
Last couple of weeks, teams said, you know, forget it, we can run on this team, and they have been. Like that to me is almost a little more concerning than anything else that's happening on the back end because that's how you get into those second and third and man rules. Like that first drive for the Cowboys, they run, you know, a 22-yard jet sweep to Turpin. The next play, they run like 12 yards up the middle to Pollard.
Yeah.
Like those things were not happening before. Now it seems like they're happening regularly.
Yeah. You know when Nick Sirianni talked about practicing the fundamentals? Right after thinking about the issues with turnovers on offense, I thought about like gap integrity
Yeah.
on defense. I think it has been a problem. I think we've seen, like Hassan Reddick crashes so hard
Yeah.
on that early play, and that's how they get that big run. And then you see a few defensive tackles kind of jumping
gaps a little.
gaps a little. I think there is a little bit of a, and I get it. Like you're pressing, you're trying to make a play. This defense, you're trying to get off the field, you're trying to make something happen. But one thing that they've been really good at for most of the year is just doing what you're supposed to do, making sure you don't leave your responsibility. And I think that they didn't do that, and at least in this last game.
Yeah, and Jason Avant on Sportsnet Central on, I guess that was Wednesday morning, did a very good breakdown on kind of some of the breakdowns for the Eagles defense. And he highlighted that Turpin play and Reddick crashing. He's like, this is a first 15 scripted play that Dallas is going to run because they know how aggressive he is coming off the edge, and he's going to crash, and this is going to be open. The Niners just did it with Deebo Samuel to him the week before. So that's stuff that they need to be, aware of. And then that very next Pollard play, you have, to your point about gap integrity, they have kind of 2 gaps covered with the linebackers. And then you have Byard coming down. He's the free, unblocked hitter and just takes a bad angle, doesn't get there, looks slow, and Pollard just kind of runs right through an arm tackle for 11 yards. So, yeah, it was a little eye-opening of kind of some of the issues. And the question I pose off of that is, how much of that do you think could be tied to how late in the season it is, how tired these guys might be? Maybe the legs start to go a little bit. You're not hanging in there to wrap, to tackle, to get in that gap quicker.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think they are fatigued. I don't think there's any question about it. But I also think opponent matters an awful lot too. Like facing good teams and you have good offensive lines. The numbers are shocking, though. So from weeks 1 through 9, the Eagles averaged on defense, they gave up 66.3 yards per game. The last 3 weeks, or the last 4 weeks since the bye, 156.3. And it's not like I know the last couple games are down big, but it was a problem before teams had it in hand.
Yeah. Like the Bills ran for like $160 on him or something
Yeah.
crazy. Like it kind of started with that Chiefs game. You know, they were like, we like Pacheco. We think we can run. We have guys in the middle of the defense or the middle of our offensive line. We're not, afraid of your D tackles. And then it just seems to be snowballing a little bit. It'll be interesting to see because, Seattle has 2 second-round picks at running back in the past 2 years. Kenneth Walker's now back. Super explosive guy. Zach Charbonnet's more of the, between the tackles, he's going to try to run you over a little bit. But both guys are playing pretty well this season. So I'm curious how if they'll come out with that same mindset, like, yeah, we can run on this team. Now, the thing they don't have that some of the teams that we just talked about is the interior of that offensive line is probably the weak point. I don't know that those guys are going to be able to move Jordan Davis or Jalen Carter or Fletcher Cox.
You're probably right about that. And they don't have the misdirection that Dallas or San Francisco have. Like those two teams have players.
Yeah, they're more straight ahead. Like
they have the Turpins and the Debos and guys who can kind of get horizontal and beat you with speed there. Like these running backs aren't doing that, and they're good though. I mean, they're good. They break some tackles, which is on my mind after watching the Eagles the last couple of weeks. Like, are they going to be able to get them down? Because you need to. I mean, you can't let guys run through arm tackles anymore.
Yeah, and to your point, like they are much more of a, hey, we're going to line up, and we're going to, hand the ball directly to this guy. There's no window dressing, no frills.
Yeah.
Like I think the Eagles probably are less susceptible to getting beat that way on the ground.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Anything else on your mind when the Eagles are on defense?
No, I think that about covers it.
Yeah.
It'd be nice if they could force a turnover or two. I mean, that worked out great last game. They ran it back, but,
What do you make of it? Like, I think there is turnover luck, certainly.
I think that gets thrown around too much.
You think so?
I do, because
it's part of it.
Like the Eagles put the ball, like offensively, they've been putting the ball on the ground a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like,
there are trends for
they
sure.
They don't force fumbles. That's why they don't get turnovers. Like they've rarely forced them. That's why
and the interceptions.
The Niners game,
down.
there were none. The Cowboys game, they got to Dak, he turned it over once. The Bills game, Allen, Bradbury made a great read and picked them off. It's not like you're looking at it like, oh man, if they just felt like in the Chiefs game, Byron makes a great play in the end zone, and then Roby makes the punch out. Like they've recovered the 2 fumbles that they forced in the last 4 or 5 games. Like those are the only 2 that have happened.
And interceptions have dried up, and it's not even like there are plays to be made.
Yeah.
There's like a few. There was the Reed Blankenship one. He couldn't come up with it.
Was that Purdy? I think.
Yeah, but there just haven't been a ton of opportunities, which is a little scary. Like, honestly, I think the guy they're missing most on defense from last year is CJ, who he was not a perfect player by any means. He was making some bad plays at times, but man, he had some juice and he had a knack for getting after the football.
Interesting note on him. So the Lions opened up his practice window today. He had a torn pec early in the season.
He's been pretty active on social media though.
But much like Avonte Maddox, torn pec early in the season. Dan Campbell today, I guess, said he's a quick healer. Any shot, Avonte, you think, in the playoffs?
Yeah, no, I think there's a shot. And they've been very careful to not say
anything. They don't want to put a timetable on.
Yeah, and Nick's good about that. But Avonte's been around, and I think there's an outside shot. You'd have to probably get deeper into the playoffs. I can see maybe divisional, maybe game. Championship weekend possible. I mean, he would be a big help.
Yeah.
They've had a lot of different players.
Yeah, I kind of just assumed he was out. Even
we
know
Chauncey's a quick healer, though. We had the what was it?
Lacerated kidney.
Yeah. Wolverine blood in him or something.
Did he miss a game? Did he miss 1 or 2 games? I feel like he missed 2 games.
Maybe, yeah.
Because I think that's when Blankenship finally got
Sure, that's right. Maybe, he didn't go on IR though, did he?
I don't think so. I think he missed 2 games. It's
crazy.
It's ridiculous.
I don't know enough about that to say if it's crazy, but it seems crazy.
Yeah. I've never lacerated a kidney, and I hope I never do.
Yeah, it doesn't sound good. Other side of the football, I think the Eagles can actually run
Yeah.
against the Seattle team.
Will they?
That's probably the bigger question, because like Seattle is not good. Like you look at their numbers as a pass defense, they're not good. But they have like decent corner play,
Yeah.
especially
Now-
with I think Witherspoon's back.
Yeah, so he had I guess it was a hip pointer in that Niners game. Yeah, if he's back, that's certainly a boost. But if he's out, I can.
Sure.
What do you think that offensive meeting room is like? They're like, if he's out, they're just going to be bombs away. Like, there's no doubt in my mind.
Especially with Jamal
that's what
Adams
would
back
happen.
there,
Yeah.
man. He can't cover.
And Woolen's had some issues this year. He's had a monster rookie season, has not been kind of up to par this year. They also have Julian Love, former Giants safety, who they know well. So I think they probably think they're ripe for the taking there in the back end. Even though it seems like a matchup where they should be able to run the ball, that'll be interesting. How much Sirianni talked about hearing the criticism. How much will he heed the reports about the routes are too slow developing? Is that something that he tries to make up for in this game?
Yeah, I don't know. I think there is like a little validity to the idea of extending some drives. But like you're right, if there's explosives and Seattle will give up explosive. I have the number here. They've given up 9 pass plays of 40+ yards this year. So you can beat them deep. And heck, the 49ers had 3 in that last game. So yeah, if you can get behind, if you have AJ Brown lined up on Reek Woolen and you have Jamal Adams helping,
Yeah.
gosh, I mean, you got to take that shot.
Yeah. I'm
And it's not like Seattle has the defensive line that
it's gonna
either
make it pay.
San Francisco or Dallas has.
Yeah, they should be able to handle those guys. They have like a lot of above average players. I
They're
feel
solid.
like.
I don't
Yeah.
want to take. I don't want to like.
I
make
like
it
every like Leonard Williams, good player. Draymond Jones, good player. Boye Mafe, like they have like
Maffei's,
yeah.
I think leads
Yeah, I
like
think he
he's
has, like,
solid,
7
but he's
sacks.
not
Yeah.
like he's not Micah, right? He's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
Nick Bosa.
They have a lot of good players.
And for the most part, I think the Eagles have been fine in pass protection.
yeah, that doesn't seem to have been a problem.
Yeah,
Like I feel like especially over
Lane
the last
got
couple
beat
games,
for a sack, which is like
But for the most part, over the last couple games, it's like when Jalen's been sacked, it hasn't been like they're straight up like coverage sacks and or indecisive on Jalen's part sacks.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think he probably gets his number flashed up on their screen when they go through it. I would love to watch one of those meetings. If I could somehow like hide under the seats at the NovaCare Auditorium
Just
and
try
just
it. Big Dom come haul you
Yeah.
out of there.
Yeah.
Like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like Uncle Phil just
Yeah, he'd be
throwing
able
you
to
out.
throw me out over the fence probably. But I like that is a fascinating element of Sirianni's coaching style is like how open he is about calling guys out in meetings. It seems to work.
Yeah. Now, again, we harken back to Swift. Like we think this is a game. Like I just need him to get touches. I don't need them. Like they're not bringing in a fullback and going I formation or anything. Like I just want him to get touches, and however you have to manufacture those. Like they want to funnel the offense through their main 3 guys, and I totally understand that. I feel like he's 3A. Like I don't think
should
he's that
be.
far below, in terms of ability to make a play.
Yeah.
And I think they don't treat him that way, and I think they should.
I agree with that. And I think part of it is the issues in pass protection with
Yeah.
him because they don't trust him to be out there in some key moments. Like you see Gainwell get a lot of third downs. You see him get the 2-minute and 4-minute where it seems like that's sometimes the only time the Eagles offense is able to move the ball. I agree with you, though. I think you have to find ways to get Swift at least a little more involved. You need another threat in the passing offense. I understand it runs through those 3 guys. You need someone else who can catch the football.
And it just seems like so easy to have him as a check down. Now, it seems like the way they've
you're allowed
operated.
to design stuff to him,
Yeah.
too. There's nothing wrong with a screen pass.
It just seems like the way they run their offense is their check downs have always been Jalen just takes off if it's not there.
Which works sometimes.
Yeah, most of the time it works. But if you're trying to protect him, which I kind of have no problem with how they've managed him this year. Like,
the only problem I have is they haven't altered their play calls.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, they still run it
based
the
on it.
same way,
Yeah.
as if he's still the same threat, even though they don't. He just hasn't been. Although it wasn't that long ago, scampering off on a 12-yard touchdown run to walk it off against Buffalo.
And even
Looked pretty good
in this
there.
last game, like there were some big draw plays that worked.
Yeah, like the 11-yarder where he fumbled. He looked good.
That was a great play.
Yeah.
A hole in the football.
Yeah. It's crazy to have all three of your best players all cough it up in the same game. It was interesting, though. In that game, there was one point in watching the game with Barrett, getting ready for postgame, and Goddard caught a ball. It might have been one of the field goal drives, and he got up, and he's like protecting the ball like this, like, hey, they're trying to punch it. And then, a couple plays later, like
He was right.
He knew what was going on, because he's generally, I feel like, a little loose with the ball, because he's usually, in space and isn't, as aware of guys behind him. And then, they just kept going after it. That must have been like a huge talking point for them all week.
Yeah, and hey, it's on tape too now.
Yeah.
So other teams are going to try. Not that they weren't already, but you see them cough out 3 balls like that, you're gonna try to get it out yourself.
Yeah. And even going back to the Niners game, I think it was they ran. I want to say it was the Niners game. I think they ran a push. And it was either Warner or Greenlaw just came in and was just punching. Like
Even
crazy.
like well
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
it was Greenlaw
Yeah.
because he was a psycho and he was
Yeah.
like punching well after the whistle.
Yeah, it's just like kind of setting the tone. Like, hey, this is what we're going to be doing all day.
Yeah, get used to it.
Yeah.
All right, man. I think that's all we have. Which way are you leaning on this game?
I feel pretty confident. I do. They just are too talented a team to fall once again, I think. They've been playing really well. Barrett's here.
I see.
Ready to jump in. Yeah, you're
I'm
locked
so
in.
used to Barrett that I can feel him staring at us, and I won't
It's like
even
there's
look
a
at
large presence. Uh-oh, here he comes.
him. Well, now I can't
Crashing
stop
the
him.
party.
That he's crashing
Uh-oh.
it.
They replaced me already?
Yeah.
What is this all about?
Call me Jermaine Mayberry.
That's a good line.
Yeah, I feel good. I know Barrett's going to pick the Eagles. He does it every week.
Yeah.
I flip-flopped on the Niners game. I was thinking it just felt like a schedule loss. Last week, I was like, I'm not doing it again. I think the Cowboys are going to win. Stuck with that. This week, I feel pretty confident the Eagles pull this out.
I do too. I think they're just the better team. Whereas like the last 2 weeks, you can argue they're just not the better team. And I think matchup-wise, it makes sense. This could be like a game where we walk out of it and think, okay, Eagles are back.
Yeah, they're fine. Yeah, I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah.
I really think they should be able to put up points. And again, if they get a lead, like that's how that defense will, like, they're not built to go,
Yeah.
to get teams off the field right away. They're, get them a lead, let them go after the quarterback, and, good things should happen.
All right. That's
All right,
all we've
Dave.
got. Yeah, thanks for doing this, Mike. I want to remind everyone, if you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click that like button, subscribe there as well. We will be back before you know it. We appreciate Barrett and Mike for stepping in. That's all we have. We'll talk to you guys after the game. It'll be a middle of the night podcast.
Good luck.
Blame the NFL for that, not me. I didn't set the schedule. In fact, I forgot to put my trash cans out yesterday because of the whole schedule switch. It throws me off. We'll talk to you guys after that game. Enjoy your weekends, everyone. Take care.